Welcome to the second episode of the Millennial Project podcast. I'm your host, Sam Stedman.
I am co-host Ethan Escrow.
And this is our second episode. So I just wanted to clarify a few things before we start. I don't feel like I was clear in the last episode exactly what this podcast is going to be about. I just wanted to say that right now, as things are, we're just looking to just have conversations about anything and everything for now. It's going to be an anything and everything podcast. No conversations are really off limits. As time goes on, I think that we may focus in on certain topics, and this could very well become something different in the future. But for now, we're just focusing on topics that we find interesting in a given week.
And also, I think it's also good that we're also talking about recent experiences that we share, and maybe just to kind of give an idea of what we like to do in our spare time or on a regular basis.
Yeah. So, like I said, it may seem like unfocused at first, but I think as time goes on, we'll focus in on topics, and we'll get better at discussing these topics. I think our insightfulness will expand, so to speak, because I feel like right now our commentary may come off as a little bland, but I think as time goes on, it'll get better. And as a friend of mine always says, practice makes perfect.
Exactly.
So bear with us while we get everything in order. We really appreciate everyone watching the podcast. And
leave us any comments on how we can improve in certain areas, because that would help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. We are all about constructive criticism on this podcast, and Mercury is being very difficult right now. Bro, choose a spot.
Yeah, he just wants to hog all the attention right now.
Okay, you good? Okay, great. He is good. Speaking of the podcast, I was thinking about it, and in order for us to really get into the YouTube algorithm and spit out the episodes and whatnot, I'm thinking we should move to filming this podcast 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. What do you think?
5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Well, even if I wanted to, my schedule wouldn't allow it. 4 o'clock, wallow in self-pity. 4:30, stare into the abyss. 5 o'clock, solve world hunger. Tell no one. 5:30, jazzercise. 6:30, dinner with me. I can't cancel that one again. 7 o'clock, wrestle with my self-loathing. I'm booked. Of course, if I bumped the loathing to 9, I could still have time to lay in bed and stare up at the ceiling and slip slowly into madness. But what would I wear?
Oh, wasn't expecting that, but okay. Yeah, no, we're not going to be filming the podcast.
No, definitely not.
5 hours, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day.
Our work schedules wouldn't allow it, and Merc wouldn't appreciate so much time that we spend on that instead of looking after his needs.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, let's just jump into it. Starting off, most important of all, how'd your week go?
Pretty good, actually. We've been kept pretty busy at work. We've been putting out more volume than usual these last 3 weeks, and I've been making a lot of extra hours as a result. And this past weekend, I even actually had a day off on Friday, and I used that time on Friday and Saturday to drive out of town and visit a couple of places I always wanted to.
What did you go see?
First of all, I drove down to Houston on Friday to see the Lone Star Flight Museum, because as a big aviation enthusiast, I've always been interested in visiting those kinds of places. And I'm glad I did, because even though the display itself wasn't as big as I've been to other places, it's still pretty cool to look at and check out. And on that day, on Friday, the Air National Guard actually brought in a Reaper drone, similar to the one that was literally knocked out over the Black Sea by a Russian fighter jet. And I got to check it out, and it was really cool to look at. And later on, I drove over to Fredericksburg, spent the night there, and next morning I went over to visit the National Museum of the Pacific War, which I'd been to before but wanted to go back to because I didn't get to see all of it last time. And it was a pretty unique and fulfilling experience. I learned
Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I learned a lot more there, and I realized that as much as I've been a big aficionado enthusiast of World War II, I still have quite a lot to learn about it, because there was stuff there that even I didn't know about until then.
And I think this could make for an interesting topic on the podcast. We didn't have this planned necessarily, but I think this is a good chance for, the audience to get to know me and us a little bit. Because like I was saying on the last podcast, we didn't really introduce ourselves particularly well. So let me just start off by asking you, of course you're into aviation,
right?
And even before you were into aviation, you're into like trains and shit like that. But I'm just curious, what is it about aviation that you find so fascinating that makes you so passionate about it?
I think it's the appeal of it, the idea of being able to slip the surly bonds of Earth from a poetic perspective and to do things that you can't do here on the ground. And I think it's because of the fact that it took only just over 100 years for aviation and aerospace in general to reach the stage that it has now, ever since its primitive beginnings in 1903. I've always been fascinated by it simply because of its adventurous appeal. The potential it has for us humans to reach new heights, literally and figuratively, and how it could shape our society in general as it already has.
Okay. So did trains have that same appeal to you?
It did. I was fascinated by how they work and how they shaped the country, how they connected the country even, and also simply because it's a really nice way to travel. Because flying is great and all, but you don't get to really see much when you're over several miles high above the earth. But when you're on the ground traveling by train, you can literally see everything around you.
Yeah.
You could see different kinds of terrains. You could see the ever-changing countryside into mountains or plains or maybe even an oceanic view. And you get service too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you get service on planes.
But it's not as upper scale. And furthermore, on trains, you get a place to sleep, and you even get to sit in an observation car.
Yeah.
Which is to me is the best part.
Come to think of it, I think I've been on more planes in my life than I have actual trains, which is a little surprising because I'm deathly afraid of flying.
Seriously? I didn't know that.
You didn't know I'm afraid of flying?
No, you never told me that.
Yeah, I'm afraid to fly. I always get the jitters before I fly.
Well, that's reasonable, and that's common among people, so you got a lot of company there. But I think that I actually admit that when I was very little, I was initially afraid to fly. But once I took my first flight with my family, I basically caught the flying bug, and I wanted to go back up. I didn't want to get off the plane, according to my grandma.
You were like a little kid, and they're pulling you out of the plane. You're like, no!
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, that's basically that's how I came to fall in love with flying in general. But I think that once you maybe if you do a little more of it, you could maybe overcome that fear and you appreciate flying for what it is.
All right, we are back. We had a small technical difficulty, nothing too bad. So anyway, we're just gonna continue, and
Now, where were we?
we were talking about your love for
Travel and machinery, and
yeah,
how I got into it and my experiences with it.
yeah. So, um, let's just move on to our next topic.
Yeah, I think we covered the travel aspect pretty well.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, we discussed this last week on the podcast, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about it again because it's I have a lot to say about it, and that is the Last of Us TV show finale. I know that you ended up finishing the show last night,
It
so
was
I'm
super
curious.
good.
What were your thoughts?
I thought that it was really faithful to the game in general on a pretty high level. And as I watched each episode in my spare time, I felt that each episode turned out better than the last. There was quite a lot of character development, and each episode had its own storyline, to say the least. And I really felt like I connected with each of the characters as they went about on their journey throughout each episode and faced this obstacle and that, and had to make some difficult choices along the way.
So, as a person who hasn't played the game, what was your favorite episode?
I think that's a good one, because I think one of my favorites that comes to mind right now is when Joel and Ellie were in Kansas City when they came across the QZ and had to help Henry and his little brother Sam escape because Henry was wanted by Kathleen's militia. So I won't go into too much detail here for risk of spoiling the episode, but
Well, the show's already over. You can spoil it. Spoiler alert.
Henry collaborated with Fedra so as to gain the medicine that he needed to help his little brother Sam get over whatever the condition he was in. I forgot exactly what it was, but in doing so, he had to basically leave a member of Kathleen's militia to be killed. In this case, it was her brother. And for that, Kathleen understandably wanted revenge and wanted to basically kill Henry personally, regardless of how much it would affect little Sam. In doing so, while they, along with Joel and Ellie, were making good their escape, they also unwittingly unleashed a horde of infected from underground, and that, in turn, led to a really intense battle scene that I didn't quite expect. It was like the mouth of hell literally opened, and just about everything unholy started pouring out. Runners, clickers, and even like an Uber runner that I hadn't seen before. I thought, now shit's about to go down. And yeah. And I thought, like, I got the feeling that all was lost at that point. But of course,
You thought everyone was gonna die right there?
no, that was just the feeling I got. Like, I felt like what they were feeling. That's just how well acted it was.
That big mofo was a bloater.
Yeah, a bloater.
That's what.
And the ending of the episode, though, was pretty sad to me because after all they'd been through, they still failed to save Henry and Sam.
Yeah. Were you surprised to see what happened to Henry and Sam? Like,
yeah,
because that's how it happens in the game. Like Henry ends up just killing himself over the loss of Sam.
Yeah, he just couldn't handle the guilt of killing his own brother after virtually dedicating his life to protecting him.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense show and game, to say the least, because I remember the first time I played. Let me move my keyboard.
But yeah, as I said, each episode was better than the last. And another,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and then another favorite that came to mind is like that one episode where Joel and Ellie finally reached that settlement out in Wyoming where Tommy was living. And to me, it looked like a pretty idyllic and aesthetic post-apocalyptic settlement.
Yeah, so you wouldn't mind living there?
I wouldn't actually.
I was thinking I wouldn't mind living there like now.
I know, right?
It
It looks like such a warm, tight-knit community that has a bit of everything that you need to survive in. And it's in an environment where, depending on what season it is, it wouldn't be too hot or too cold. And there's plenty of wildlife abundant in the surrounding area, so you won't have to worry about wanting for food or water.
Yeah, it just seemed like a very simple way of life.
And I think we can all relate to that.
It's just like no internet and like no like real no politics, no drama.
It's just people sticking together for the simple matter of survival and putting aside their differences in doing so.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Riadosa, in the winter. I think it was a pretty nice setting. But okay, I'm saying, gun to your head, you have to choose your favorite episode. Is it going to end up being the one with Henry and Sam? You think?
At this point, I think it's going to be a tie with episode 8, the one with Ellie.
Now, gun to your head. You got to choose between 5 and 8. I think that was the one you're talking about. Episode 5, when they were mainly with Henry and Sam.
No, that was episode 3. No, episode 4.
No, episode 4, they met Henry and Sam at the very end. Remember?
Yeah.
Episode 5, that's when they spent time with them.
But yeah, I think episode 5, because I liked how tense it was.
Episode 5, that was the one with all the runners and clickers. And
yeah, that was it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm making sure. I couldn't remember if they were in like 2 whole episodes.
No, they just appeared at the end of episode 4.
They appeared at the end of episode 4 and then they died at the end of episode 5.
That's right.
Right. I couldn't remember. Okay, so for me, I would have to say my favorite episode of the whole series was probably episode 8.
The one with David.
The one with David, because literally that episode was just a plain-faced retelling of the game. Like, they were literally going almost shot for shot, redoing the game. There was things that they skipped over, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But, okay, anyway, like I was saying, yeah, episode 8 was probably my favorite episode at the end.
Because of its faithful shot-for-shot retelling.
Right. But having said all that, I do have some criticisms. Actually, before I get to the criticisms, I want to know what you thought of the ending of the show.
I thought that it was kind of fulfilling, like the ending of one journey, and now you're hyped up to see what will happen next. Because as Joel said to Ellie, should I spoil it?
Yeah.
All right. It's like, just because you reach the end of one journey doesn't mean that you should have to stop fighting for something you believe in, and should be ready to go on another journey if necessary.
Okay, so, but did Joel do the right thing?
I have mixed feelings about that, because as he mentioned to Ellie, there are actually dozens of people out there who were immune to cordyceps as Ellie was.
That was a lie. He lied.
What?
Yeah, he lied to her.
But I thought they... But
No.
he swore to her that it was true.
No, he was lying. Because you heard Marlene. You heard what Marlene said. Like, Ellie was like the only one they found.
and yet I actually did think about that. Now that I remember, I realized, Joel, why are you doing this? I thought, why'd you have to go into rampage mode to take Ellie when they were trying to make something to put an end to this whole apocalypse once and for all?
That's what I'm saying. Do you think he made the right decision? Like he
Looking back
he rescued Ellie, but he rescued Ellie, but by the same token, he also damned the entire world. Not that the world wasn't already damned, but he definitely damned the entire world. So that's why I'm asking, did he make the right decision by saving this little girl? And,
Okay, at this point, I'm going to have to say no. I thought, why? Joel, you went rampage mode just to save Ellie. I know you were close to her, but was it really worth it to spend the rest of your lives and in an apocalyptic world and let Ellie grow up and such? Wouldn't you want to see Ellie's children and grandchildren grow up in a better place?
Well, there is the argument that, the world took everything from Joel, so Joel took everything from the world. And, Joel was just, he's had everything, oh my God, Merc.
He has had everything taken from him, and
he's had everything taken from him. So he's like, you know what? I'm done with this. If the world's gonna take one more thing, I'm not gonna let the world have it.
Yeah, because I can understand Joel's viewpoint because he didn't want to lose who he turned out to be his surrogate daughter of sorts away from him again, the same way he lost Sarah. I thought, yeah, I can understand Joel's position, but still, you gotta be willing to make a sacrifice at some point.
Yeah.
Besides, what if Joel met somebody at some point, and he ends up having a child again?
Joel is like 50 years old in the series.
He could still, if he met someone, he could still have potential to raise a family again. I mean, sure, he'd be at a bit of an advanced age, but it's not impossible.
Well, that's beside the point. Well, I was just asking, as someone who didn't play the game, if you thought he made the right decision, and you're saying no, he should have let Ellie die to save the world. Is that what you think?
If it meant bringing back the world to maybe the way it was before or even better, then yeah.
Well, you got to think about it this way. Let's say he let Ellie die, and the Fireflies were able to get a cure. They were able to get the cure.
And I think that he probably would have taken his own life.
Well, what I'm getting at is think about the power dynamic that would create in the world. You have one specific group with a cure to this affliction, and they control the cure. And everyone else, they don't have it. Think about the kind of power that group would have.
I see where you're getting at now.
They would be able to control literally anything they wanted.
And they would determine like who gets the cure and who doesn't.
They talk about Fedra being the big bad government. Well, with that kind of power, they could very well become
Fedra.
They could become their own version of Fedra. And obviously the Fireflies weren't perfect. They were willing to kill a little girl in order to get the cure.
Basically get what they needed to gain the same level of power that Fedra had.
Yeah.
So I see where you're getting at here. I don't know why I didn't think this through initially, but now I am, and I can understand why Joel. Now I'm really beginning to understand why Joel did what he did.
This kind of gets into my criticisms with the series. While I did enjoy the Last of Us series. There are certain things about it that I did not like. First of all, let me say, since we were talking about The Cure, in the TV show, they make it seem, they kind of make it more ambiguous with The Cure. They kind of hint in the show that they say in the show, oh, there's a chance that this will give us the cure.
But they didn't know for sure.
They didn't know for sure, but in the game, it's a lot more definitive. In the game, they say, look, this'll definitely give us a vaccine. This will definitely give us a vaccine for the cordyceps fungus. And when you say in the TV show that this might give us a cure, I feel like it almost diminishes it diminishes the role that Ellie plays in the story, I think. Because in the game, when they say, look, Ellie's the only person we've found that's immune, and killing her will definitely give us a cure, that makes Ellie a very, very important character in the story. But when in the TV show, when they say, there's a chance it might provide us a vaccine, it makes Ellie not as important.
And as such, they probably would have just used her as something like a guinea pig of sorts.
And it makes it diminishes her role, and it makes the ending a lot less impactful, because it makes Joel's decision less, world altering, so to speak. Because if he rescues Ellie, and then it's found out later, oh well, actually she couldn't have cured mankind,
then all that they'd been through would have been for naught.
It's like, okay, well, whatever. Like, yeah, what you did in the moment was kind of shitty, but at the end of the day, it didn't really matter. But if we knew for a fact, yes, it would provide a cure, then it would, it's different. If we knew for a fact it provided a cure, then it has a lot bigger impact for Joel. Like, you could very well have other people out there looking for Ellie.
If they knew that she was immune.
Yeah, so that was one criticism I had about the TV show. The TV show made her curing mankind a little more ambiguous, and I think it would have been more impactful for them to definitively say, yes, this will provide the cure. Now, I know at the end of the day, that's not exactly realistic. When it comes to like biological medicine, you can't really know for sure. But, for the sake of the narrative, I think it's better to just say, yes, it'll definitely cure her. Also, another criticism I had with the show was that the show was very short, I felt like.
Only 9 episodes, so it felt more like a mini-series.
It was like, it very much felt like the footnotes of the series. Now, at first, when I started watching the show, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, well, they're expanding on certain things, and they seem to be fleshing out the game, which I liked that. But then after a while, it seemed like they were just hitting the footnotes of the series. It was almost like they were doing the greatest hits of the show, and I felt like they rushed through the entire series. I think had they shown more stuff from the game while also expanding on the story, it would have been more impactful for like newcomers like yourself. I think it would have been better.
Yeah, and now I'm actually thinking about actually playing the game to compare and contrast between the game and the show, and now and I think I'll get a clearer picture of what Sam means by footnotes.
Yeah, because there just wasn't a ton of action in the show. It was Yeah, it was. I mean, I know The Last of Us, it's not about the zombies, it's not about the action and whatnot. It's about the characters.
And the journey that they go on, how it defined them into who they are.
But, like, they really should have taken more time to have more zombies and more action in the show, because I feel like when they're talking about, like, curing the cordyceps fungus in the show, it's like, well, is the cordyceps really that big of a threat in the TV show? Because, like, when was the last time we even saw a fucking zombie?
I know, because even after 20 years, I think that people were getting used to living in a post-apocalyptic world, and I think that they were already adapting to their new surroundings and being relatively isolated with having nothing but all that basically Mother Nature could give them. And if you think about it, I think that since the world virtually ended, Mother Nature itself had a chance to reclaim the earth from mankind and let everything grow and be abundant again.
Yeah, definitely. So it was almost like the zombies had already, like, died out themselves, and, like, going to all this trouble to get a cure, it almost, like, it's not worth it. Like, all the trouble they went through in the TV show, because they're just, the zombies, they weren't around that much, and most of the world, as you saw, it was pretty much desolate.
Yeah, I expected more, to be honest.
And so
But I think we got a lot of that though in episode 5 though. I think that was the most action that took place in a single episode.
in the video game, there's a lot more action in the show. Like, for instance, in Bill's town, when you meet Bill, like, you go on, like, a whole adventure with Bill, like fighting zombies and stuff, because you have to get a car battery with Bill. But in the game, they don't even meet Bill. They don't even talk to him. Ellie doesn't ever meet him, and I don't know. Like, don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the series. I thought it was very well done. Overall, I'd give the whole series a 7.5 out of 10. But I thought the game did it better, because the game, while it didn't expand on certain things like the TV show, it did show that the world was a threat, and that there are people out there that are a threat, and there's a lot of zombies out there that are a threat, and Ellie was a definitive cure at the end of the day. So that's why they went through all this trouble to get Ellie across the country. And the TV show just didn't do that to the same degree as the game. I thought the game was better. I thought the TV show was good. The game was a masterpiece, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's why I think that even though I haven't played the game, I'll still give the show itself maybe an 8 at most. But now I think I really ought to get myself a PS5 and play the game so that I can observe the comparison and contrasting, as mentioned earlier.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see.
What else do we want to go into?
How long have we been recording now?
About 25 minutes.
25 minutes. Okay.
And we did 12 earlier.
Okay. All right, so moving on to our next topic, we wanted to discuss parallel universes, and you might notice our clothes have changed. Yes, we filmed this podcast over the course of 2 weeks. But anyway, our next topic is going to be parallel universes, something that's always fascinated both of us, and we've done a little research on this topic. That way we have something to actually discuss.
It's a little complicated to say the least, but it's nonetheless fascinating because it really captures the imagination when you think about it.
Yeah, I've always found parallel universes pretty cool because I like to think like what could what could have happened.
Even if it's like the smallest of changes that hardly anybody else notices, it's still a difference.
There's a theory out there that for everything that can happen does happen. So there very well could be a universe out there where the smallest minute thing is different, but the universe is there. Like there could very well be a universe out there where you're just wearing a white shirt.
And where Sam is wearing a blue shirt. This is a little something called the Mandela effect, which I think
That's
we can
not
all.
the Mandela effect.
It isn't?
No, what a small minute difference. That's just a parallel universe. But
I was going to say that a prominent example of an alternate reality where there's the most minute of changes that hardly anybody else notices until after it's made is the Mandela effect.
yeah, Mandela effect's a little different than just parallel universes in general. Mandela effect is a specific aspect of a parallel universe. But why don't you just go ahead and explain to our audience what the Mandela effect is exactly and where it came from and whatnot?
The Mandela effect, as you all might imagine, was named after the great African activist Nelson Mandela. This phenomenon came into prominence after people argued about as to when Mandela actually passed away, whether it was as recently as December of 2013 or as far back as the 1980s. For some reason, people think differently, and they remember that whether that Mandela died, whether in the 80s or 2013, and they can't explain why. They just say that they know that for a fact.
Yeah, when his death was announced on TV back in 2013, there were a whole lot of people that thought he had already died in prison in the 80s. And
and Mercury's kind of freaking out about it.
And yeah, I don't count myself in that category of people that thought he had died in prison in the 80s. But yeah, I didn't count myself in that category. But then again, I never took much time out of my day to think about
Me
Nelson
neither.
Mandela. I mean, I knew who he was, but I just never thought about like I never thought about his death or had he already been dead. I had just assumed he was alive and kicking because I had heard stories that he he was known for his age. Like he was an old man.
Yeah, he was, and even at the time, he was already struggling with illness.
But having said all that, like Ethan was saying, the Mandela effect is this phenomena that has been described as a large group of people having, false memories. And another example of the Mandela effect would be the Berenstain Bears.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That was a Mandela effect that freaked me out.
Same here, because I think we both remembered that the name Berenstain was spelled with an E in the stain instead of an A, as we now see.
Because I remember I could have sworn when I was a kid, when I would look at the book, it would say Berenstein, and I even remember adults and kids pronouncing it that way sometimes.
Yeah, I do too.
They would say the Berenstain Bears. And if it was Berenstein, if it was spelled with an A, no one would have said Berenstein.
They would have said Berenstain because that's how it would have been pronounced.
Yeah, because the A doesn't justify a steen sounding.
Because it doesn't make any grammatical or syllable sense.
Exactly. So, like, when I saw that it was Berenstain, I was, like, freaking out a little bit because I was like, I know. Like, when I was a kid, I remember it saying Stin.
Exactly. And there are other examples, too, as noticed in movies. For example, in Forrest Gump, the titular character says, "My mom always says that life is like a box of chocolates," and yet, for some reason, we seem to hear, "My mom always says life was like a box of chocolates." I remember hearing Forrest Gump saying "is" instead of "was," though, and yet that's how the dialogue actually goes.
To say life was like a box of chocolates doesn't make sense.
I know, and yet apparently that's in the script.
Because when you say life was,
That's
it's
not
like, okay, it was, but what is it now?
exactly. It's like describing a previous life of sorts.
Yeah, so I didn't. That one kind of freaked me out a little bit. Not as much as the Berenstain Bears, but there are that one does scare me.
But I think going into how the Mandela effect works, I think that it's based on the theory that the universe itself is infinite and how sometimes their alternate or parallel universes are so closely together that there is a slight but significant gap or portal of sorts that bridges two universes together, our own and another one, and that sometimes they interconnect and changes are made based on people unwittingly stepping into them for seconds or minutes at a time, but there are also some instances of people feeling like they've been in that alternate reality for longer than that.
Yeah. There's also the theory that a lot of us have shifted universes unknowingly, and that these shifts happen just kind of randomly without explanation. And I don't know why that sort of thing would happen, obviously. But
maybe it's a glitch in the Matrix, and all of our 7 odd billion brains are hooked up to a supercomputer.
I don't know. Anything's possible. That's why I find the whole topic really fascinating, because it's just kind of infinite possibilities. And you remember that show Sliders?
Yes, I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah, Sliders was a TV show back in like the mid 90s, starring Jerry O'Connell, and he invents this machine that can take him to parallel worlds, and he gets kind of trapped in the machine, and he has to find a way back to his like home universe, basically.
But that would prove easier said than done, because as we mentioned, there are infinite possibilities, and those changes range from big to small.
Yeah, and there's times in the show when he does think that he's home, but something comes up and he's like, oh no, like it's a small difference, but it's not
Life altering.
Yeah, like spoiler alert. In like it's like the first or second episode, like he thinks he's home, but the difference in the universe is that his dad is actually alive.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking.
And like he gets home and he's all happy and his mom's glad to see him, and then his dad walks in the door and he's like, oh fuck. Like,
yeah, but wait, Dad, you're dead. Because then that would have changed everything.
Yeah. And that's where the episode ends.
And in particular, as a history major, there were other episodes that show like history as we know it being altered, Like, for example, there was one episode in which the British won the Revolutionary War and America is ruled by Britain. And in another episode, we Americans, we lost the Cold War and the Soviet Union spread and the Soviets rule America. Just to name a couple.
Yeah. Pretty good show. I would highly recommend it if you're bored one night and you're in the mood for some 90s television.
Yeah, the 90s television was pretty cool, and even every now and then I binge watch older shows for a bit of nostalgia.
But there are some notes that I took of some other aspects of parallel universes that I wanted to discuss. Have you heard the story of the London Hammer?
The London Hammer?
Yeah.
No, I haven't. What is it?
There was a hammer that was discovered in London, Texas, and it's out. I think it's kind of out near Glen Rose Park. It must be a small town. I don't know anything about the town, but this couple discovered a hammer that looked to be about 200 years old or so, and the kick was that it was encased in rock that dated back 100 million years.
Whoa. So it was kind of like a Neanderthal tool?
Well, the hammer itself only looked to be about 200 years old or so, but it was encased in 100 million year old rock.
That sounds like maybe perhaps the earliest example of a time slip.
And so the theory was that this hammer either traveled back in time and was encased in that rock, or that the hammer was from a parallel universe in which humans developed much earlier than they did in our universe. Because as you know, in our universe, modern humans only appeared maybe about 100,000 years ago or so.
Yeah, I think 200,000 at most.
200. It's something, but it wasn't 100 million years ago.
No, because there was no way we could have coexisted with the dinosaurs.
Yeah. So you can actually go see the hammer at it's a museum out in Glen Rose.
That sounds really cool, though. I'd never heard of it till now. And for another example of a time slip, for those of you who read novels like I do, you may have heard of Stephen King's novel 11/22/63. It's about a guy who finds himself unwittingly traveling back in time to the early 1960s, and he finds himself in a position where he could potentially alter history as we know it by preventing the assassination of then President John F. Kennedy, hence the title.
Yeah.
Even though I haven't read the book itself, I've done a bit of research on it, and I found it fascinating that when you fall down a rabbit hole like that, as we call it, you find yourself in a position where you could change everything for better or worse based on simply interacting with someone in a time before yours. Because even in that instance, one small difference can lead to the biggest of changes, and it would be unavoidable as such.
Now, do you think it's possible that the reason why we don't have any, proven time travelers in our universe is because when you do time travel, when you travel back in time, even just by being there, you've created an alternate reality. And then when you travel back to your own time, you don't travel back to the universe you were in.
You travel to another one entirely.
Even though it may appear the same, it's a different universe, and that would explain why there's no time travelers in our universe, because it may be possible, but when they come back to ours, quote unquote,
yeah.
it's different, even if it's a small difference. Like if you step on a bug back in, this is an extreme example, or it may not be extreme, But if you like go back to like the dinosaurs and you step on a bug, you may prevent, you may prevent an entire war in the future.
Or perhaps even prevent like the ongoing of a certain disease.
So let's speculate here a little bit. You were talking about 11/22/63, and spoiler alert for the book, when he does actually prevent the assassination of JFK, but when he gets back to the present, it's like a war-torn universe that he comes back to. I don't think it was nuclear war necessarily. I think it was just war-torn.
Sounds like what might have resulted in the novel The Stand.
But let's speculate here. What do you think would have happened had JFK not been assassinated?
I think for one thing, our maybe the war in Vietnam wouldn't have gone on as long as it did, or we may have been able to avoid that conflict entirely, and the Civil Rights Act would have been established and signed in 1964 as it did. Maybe a little earlier.
But do you think JFK would have done that? Because Lyndon Johnson himself knew that he was betraying his party's base by signing it. So it could have very well, the Civil Rights Act could have very well been signed in the 70s or maybe the 80s, and it could have very well delayed our timeline. And JFK was popular when he got killed. He could have very well served another term, and Johnson could have never become president.
Yeah.
So I think it could have very well pushed back the timeline and caused a delay in the civil rights movement. But
and maybe also, like, since you say it would have delayed our timeline, maybe technology wouldn't have advanced as much as it has up to this point.
I don't know. That's the thing. Like, I don't know what could have happened. But moving on from that, I have a few more examples of here. Stephen Hawking even postulated a theory that black holes could very well be gateways to parallel universes, and he had an interesting theory that to the layman could very well make sense.
What's that?
So, with black holes, okay, Merc, you gotta get down. So, with black holes, they could be gateways to parallel universes, and the reasoning Stephen Hawking had behind this was because black holes. Okay, let me start over. When you let's say you have a piece of rock,
okay,
and you take a sledgehammer to the rock, and you just start beating the rock, and you hit it and hit it and hit it and hit it until it's just like dust. Now, no matter how many times you hit that piece of rock, there's always going to be some sort of trace evidence of that rock, right?
Right.
No matter how many times you hit it, there's always going to be something left of that rock.
Because it's down to the smallest atoms.
Right. But with black holes, if you take all of that dust from that rock and you throw it into a black hole, it's going to suck everything up. It's going to take everything with it, and there's not going to be any trace evidence of that rock when it comes to black holes, because black holes take in everything.
Right.
And that's where he came up with his theory that it goes to a different universe because there's no more evidence of that rock having existed. But because no matter what you do to a rock in our universe right now, if you beat it with a hammer or whatever, it's always going to be there. But if there's a black hole and you put everything from that rock into that black hole, it's not there anymore.
It's just simply sent into oblivion, potentially.
And that he's saying it's not going to a different part of the galaxy, it's going to a different universe.
And therefore, the black holes themselves, they might be the potential portals or bridges between universes that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, exactly. So, I thought that theory was...
Would you want to take like a small craft in there and see for yourself, though?
No.
I don't blame you, because going into like utter blackness just to see if there's something on the other side, that's a bit of a terrifying prospect, even for me.
You could very well end up... Okay, assuming, of course, Stephen Hawking was right, you could very well end up in a universe where, one, it's completely war-torn. You could end up in a universe where, our current laws of physics are different. You could end up in a universe where Earth doesn't have an oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, and you could just get there and be like...
Yeah, or you could end up in a universe or where Earth is where society has advanced so much that war is abolished, medicine is advanced, that there's a cure for anything and every disease known to man, and where space travel is a common thing, and we have colonized other habitable planets in our solar system and beyond.
I guess the chances of you ending up somewhere bad are about the same as the chances of you ending up somewhere good.
So it'd be kind of like 50-50?
I guess, yeah.
Give or take.
Or you could very well end up in a place that's entirely mediocre.
Like our own universe?
Yeah, where it's not awful. It's not awful, but it's not like great.
Right.
So
but it's just like
maybe it's like 33 33 33 in the sense, because you may get there and be like,
meh,
this is okay, I guess. Like, it ain't awful, but it's not great. And that's something else I wanted to mention when it comes to these universes.
Or you could end up like in the worst possible universe ever, like in that sci-fi horror movie Event Horizon.
I just lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh.
Dang. I forgot. Oh, well.
Maybe we just...
I remember now.
I was going to say, maybe we just slipped into another universe entirely just now.
So, I know you've seen that episode from Star Trek, Yesterday's Enterprise.
Yes.
So, that episode's pretty fascinating to me because in that, someone travels back in time, but when they come to the reality,
it changed instantly.
It changed instantly, and nobody noticed.
Exactly.
Nobody noticed, and that made me think, what if that is constantly happening to us? Like, what if time travel is commonplace in the future, and people are coming back to our reality, and they're changing reality, but because we exist here, we just don't notice these changes. Like, these changes could very well be happening every minute of every day.
And we're not noticing.
And there could be someone coming back in time to prevent bad things from happening in our universe.
In this case of Yesterday's Enterprise, we go from our universe to another one in which the Federation is at war with the Klingon Empire because the Klingons felt that they were abandoned by the Federation, and only one person on the Enterprise knows that they're in a different reality and that it needs to be changed in order for things to get back to normal. And when that does happen, I won't go into detail, things do go back to normal, and again, nobody but that one person notices.
Well, what I'm getting at is that these changes could very well be happening all the time, and we may not even notice them. And that's a fascinating thought. Like when you woke up this morning, even though you went through your morning routine, you showered, you brushed your teeth and everything, we could have very well shifted into different universes in that few hours, and we just may not have noticed it. And the changes could have been huge, could have been massive changes, but because we exist here, we just don't notice them. Yeah, it could have been. It could have. You could have very well woken up in a universe this morning where we were about to go to war with, Russia or something, but something changed between 8 a.m. and what is it now, 11 a.m. Could have very well changed, but now we're in a universe that's safe from that kind of thing, and we just don't notice because these changes are constantly happening.
Exactly. But anyway, I agree with Sam that this is a very fascinating topic as it keeps me thinking of all the infinite possibilities that they're just... It's a little scary and fascinating to think about, but it still keeps my imagination going, and that's why I like to debate it every now and then.
There is one more other story that I wanted to talk about that I think you may find interesting because I found it on the internet and I found it interesting. Okay, have you heard the story of the Torrid Traveler?
Yes, the man from Torrid. He was supposedly a local passenger on an airline making a flight to Japan from a country that no one has apparently ever heard of, and he had to be investigated as such when he couldn't present papers or evidence that his country actually existed.
Yeah, so the story is that this man in 1956, he landed in Tokyo, and when he was going through customs, they asked him for his identification. So he hands over his identification, and it's from a country called the United Kingdom of Taured, Taured, and everyone's looking over his paperwork and whatnot, and they're perplexed because they're like, this country doesn't exist, your passport, we're all confused. And he even provides a bank statement to customs proving that he's from, this country of Torrid. So they look at everything, and he tells them, like, this, he shows them on a map. He's like, this is where my country exists, and it's between France and Spain. And they're like, okay, well, we need to look over all this and whatnot. So they lock him in a room, and they call the police. And when the police arrive, he's not there anymore.
There was no trail that or any evidence as to where he went. He just simply went off the face of the earth, in other words.
Yeah, he disappeared, and that could have very well been an instance where it was either a glitch in the Matrix or our universe. The airplane could have very well intersected with his universe. Like, imagine he was sitting on the plane in his universe. His plane intersected with ours. He was temporarily transported to our universe,
and
it just took time for the universes to separate themselves.
And then when he disappeared, he may have simply gone back to his own reality.
Right.
So yeah, so even while traveling, there is a possibility that you could find yourself in a different place entirely.
And there are people that believe that the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes, such as the disappearance of Flight 19 right after the end of World War II, and no evidence or any wreckage of the TBM Avenger torpedo bombers could be found, nor of any other aircraft or ships that had disappeared there have ever been found. The only real idea we have of just how mysterious the Bermuda Triangle was when Flight 19's flight leader said that the water looked different and that something looked very wrong here.
Yeah, and that could very well be, evidence that those planes and boats and whatnot, and those people have gone to a parallel universe. There is one more example, deja vu.
Yes, I've had that before. I can honestly say though, I have dreams at night that I see certain people and I find myself in certain scenarios, and then sometime later when I'm awake during the daytime, I see those same or similar scenarios and circumstances, and I think, whoa, I've seen this before, and then this has happened to me before in a dream I had a while ago.
And they say that dreams and deja vu could very well be peeks into alternate universes. You may have looked at an alternate universe temporarily.
Yeah, to me it's always like every time I sleep, my subconscious tries to tell me of something that will happen in the near or distant future, but I won't necessarily remember it until the moment that it happens.
Yeah. I just think it's a very fascinating topic, and I would like to discuss it again here in the future on the podcast, and gather some more stories to see what can be come up with, because the Torrid Traveler, I find that one particularly interesting, and we'll see what we come up with. But anyway, I think that's about all the time we have for this rendition of episode 2 of the podcast. Remember, you guys, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment down below. It helps the YouTube algorithm pick up the podcast,
and also maybe leave us some ideas as to what we can discuss in future sessions.
Yeah. So if you've watched this far, we really appreciate y'all watching. And yeah, I think that's about all the time we have for this week's rendition of the podcast. I'm your host, Sam Stedman.
I am co-host Ethan Escrow, and Mercury is our other co-host, is just being available.
All right, thanks guys for watching.
Thanks.
All right,
Later.
I still don't know how to end this thing.